Should we get into it?
Sure.
Okay. So we're going to read Dioscorides on Pharmacy and Medicine by John M. Riddle.
Oh, man.
Yeah, we all know Mr. Riddle.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So, basically what I got from this is, I read the foreword, which was kind of interesting.
Oh, nice. I actually haven't read that in a second. If you want to give I don't know, what did you find interesting about it?
I feel like, it had a little bit more content in terms of stuff to talk about, because it was sort of laying out the story.
Right.
Not the introduction. Not the acknowledgments.
Right. Well, because Dioscorides, he was Greek, although he was born in a region that's now Turkey. We don't have to get into all of that. It's a bit of a touchy subject, the old Ottoman subject.
Yeah, right. The Greeks are really upset about it. Yeah,
I think they are actually.
Wait, are they? I don't know much about modern.
No, certainly they're salty about the whole Ottoman Empire stuff. Some of them, not all of them, obviously.
Well, that's not that long ago.
Exactly.
This is pretty long ago.
Yeah, but it makes you think about regions when you, especially because, so he was living in the 1st century.
Right.
So, I think the author estimated between 60 and like 78 AD.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it was, he was a Roman subject, but he was of Greek ancestry. But yeah, it's just, it makes you remember how sort of fickle, in some sense, boundaries and nation states and everything are, because they are constantly moving and people are constantly moving. And was a Greek 2,000 years ago the same as a Greek now? Right. It's like probably not.
They probably didn't have a passport.
Yeah, they died. Well, the Romans probably had some type of thing to delineate that they were a citizen.
How did they do that? I read about this once. Did we read about this on the podcast, or this is something separate?
So.
It was weird. So there wasn't written documentation, but they do things like ask you what language your parents spoke and stuff like that.
Yeah, and also like they kind of talked about it, how you'll have like a Roman name, too, and stuff. But yeah, anyway, so the foreword.
Right. So it's just going through a little bit. It's a little bit more biographical, and it's talking about this person, Dioscorides, and his work in writing about different medical treatments and pharmaceutical treatments, I guess.
Right.
There's a lot of words that are used that I don't know the strict distinctions between very well, like pharmacological versus pharmaceutical, which I actually don't think it says in this book. I just said that. So I have a few questions for you, actually, in terms of specific terminology. But it's just going through his history, and like he's from this particular part of the world that was developing a big intellectual center in Tarsus, which is interesting also because Paul from like the Bible was also from Tarsus.
Was it? Right. What was his name before?
Saul. That's
right.
Right.
The big change.
Actually, I've read that it's not really a changed name. It's just a different language of the same name.
Didn't he used to like kill Christians?
Well, in theory, he persecuted them.
Right.
He made fun of their hair and stuff.
Yeah. I already burned them. That's a little bit more egregious. I mean,
but
making fun of
maybe
their
he was
hair.
like, haha, your hair is on fire.
Yeah. That's, yes. So exactly, Tarsus, which I guess is now in Turkey.
Right.
Those
poor Greeks.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's interesting because it's like none of his original writings. So basically he was a compiler. He compiled like a immense and comprehensive pharmacopeia of the medicines that a Roman physician at the time was using. Right. And the reason that we're talking about him and that people have sort of gone, why his work has lasted the ages is because, like I said, it was is much more comprehensive, much more detailed, and also just the way that it was organized was really actually ahead of its time, even though a lot of people actually reorganized his work and made it like alphabetical order in the ones that, because a lot of copies of his original work, because there's no original work that actually lasted, so a lot of people made copies and they reorganized it to be like alphabetical, but he was actually organizing it to be basically based off of the effects on the body, which is essentially how we organize it if you were to study medicine or pharmacology today. And yeah, like to go into your thing about pharmaceutical, I think that's just like drug preparation. Especially, I just think of, pharmaceutical companies. Those are companies that are making drugs. And pharmacology is kind of probably more of an umbrella term that encompasses pharmaceuticals, where it's just like anything having to do with the drugs that are being used in medicine. And so that's going to include the effects and everything like that, the classifications. And yeah, I mean, is there anything else interesting in the foreword? Some more interesting biographical
things?
He
says that Dioscorides drugs always have properties, that's in quotes, and not vaguely perceived powers, which is in quotes, of earlier Greek writings. Right.
He was very rational, and that was something that the author was emphasizing. And it's something that, I don't know if you remember, but this was the first book we read for the podcast, way back when. We're coming up on a year, man.
Is it?
Oh, I mean, 3 months, 4 months. It was May, I think. Yeah. But the first book we read, Doctors, by Sherwin B. Newland.
The good old days. That was a fun one.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, and we can get to this. Well, I'll get back to that. Excuse me. But he was also emphasizing, and I think this is what a lot of historians do, is emphasizing the people who were more rationalistic back then. Like even Galen was very experimental. And again, this is what sort of puts Dioscorides, as you said, ahead of the other people that were writing, is that, and the author even makes a point to emphasize how he stood beyond the philosophical arguments of the time. He was just like, I'm organizing this based off of the clinical observations that I've had. I'm not thinking about like any, highfalutin theory or anything like that. I'm just telling you, what did I see, and this is how I'm organizing it, and this is what I'm describing. Right. And again, it's like, I think we should all take this as a lesson of like the people that are just using their observations and recording it as they see it are generally, it seems like, those are the people that history looks the most kind on. Even if you get persecuted for it at the during the day, because again, it's like he was discussing there were like 5 big schools at the time: the pneumaticists, the dogmatists, the empiricists, the Esculapiades, and the Methodists. All of these people, like, these were different like schools of medicinal thought, and Dioscorides sort of stood. He didn't really subscribe to any of those. I guess the closest might have been the Esculapiades. I'm not pronouncing it. Sorry, correctly. With an A. It's there's the one with the A. Yeah. Esculapiades. I just said it the same way. Maybe the closest to that, because they were a little bit more rational than the others. But even then, and I think his teacher, who he dedicates his work to, was part of that at one point, but then decided that they were idiots, essentially. And I think that's Dioscorides was following in that belief. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty good idea, though. And so again, he was trying to stand beyond all of the debates, the esoteric debates that intellectuals get into about things, and just being like, well, let's just look at what's happening. Right.
Now, I feel like there's a problem in that the rejection of any school of thought could become its own school of thought. There could be like the observationalists. And what they all do is they just call it as they see it, so to speak.
Right. Well, it's interesting that the empiricists were sort of, I mean, we have a different definition of
Yes.
empiricists
Yeah.
now, which I would say is what Dioscorides essentially was
Right.
by our definition. But
Right.
by their definition, it was something different.
Right.
But I agree. I see what you're saying. Yeah, anything has its tendency. And we made that point, I think, a while ago. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up my notes. Any long institution, I mean, oligarchy forms, right? And then people start defending things based off of not necessarily the actual facts, but based off of legacy principles and stuff like that. Yeah, and
then this is where the counter argument for working off principles rather than working off a system like calling it like I see it or something like that. So people who are very into principles, like rationalists and stuff like that, argue that in and of itself is a stopper against corruption in a system. Because you have the rules laid out and you're following them or you're not.
Right. But how do you know but then, of course, if the rules are wrong...
Right, exactly. What do we do? We're screwed. It's like
we're screwed. Yeah.
This is where I'm getting with all this philosophy stuff. Is just like I don't know. It's like, what do you do?
Yeah, but again, I keep coming back to the point where it's like it's good to reflect on these things.
Right.
Even if we get to that point, it helps to do that because then you can, well, again, realize that you are not that smart. Nobody's really that smart, and that 100% certainty on really anything is always something to be cautious about.
Right. Well, because if you already have rules, especially about something medicinal, if you're not understanding it, or you have rules that are sending you in a direction that is incorrect, you're not even going to be able to see it if you're just operating based on principle. Versus a simple question like, I give somebody this herb, what happens?
Right. Right.
Oh, they throw up. I wonder why.
Right.
Or something like that.
Right. But even that's a principle, as you said.
Yeah, right, exactly. I know.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say, so it's interesting because it's like the empiricists, I guess the Methodists and the empiricists were kind of related. So these are just, like I said, there were kind of 5 schools of medicine. And so the Methodists rejected causation in anatomy and thought that disease was due to the body's wetness, dryness, or a combination. And so you treated things by making like a dry body wet and a wet body dry. And the Methodists apparently kind of came from the empiricists who rejected the idea that the body could be understood. Which again is kind of like that goes exactly against what we would say empiricism is. I wonder how it got so flipped. So like they didn't do dissections because they thought they were disgusting, and you couldn't learn anything. Yeah, kind of. I mean, that's honestly what the author was saying. But also, they figured that you couldn't learn anything from a dead body.
Right.
So this was in opposition to, I think, the major medical. Because the empiricists were older and the Methodists were more around Dioscorides' time. And so you had this other school, which I can't say, but the Asclepiades, so Asclepiades, or just called the A school. Yeah. And the A school... were a bunch of a-holes. No, they also rejected like the humoral theory for a more atomic theory, and focused more on teleology, which is basically like the causation of things. So again, it's like in some ways, I feel like Dioscorides is actually, even though he apparently in his writings came at them, it does seem like you can see that he had some influences. Yeah. And they treated based off of symptoms with diet, exercise, and baths. And again, these people were more similar, apparently came from the dogmatists, which were an older school who thought you could use reason and logic to understand the body. Right. And then you had a fifth, the pneumatists, who basically just added another humor.
Right, pneuma.
Exactly, pneuma, which... He actually didn't really go into that in the writings.
It's
but
an interesting idea, though. Like
it is.
wetness.
Yeah, I kind of want to read more into that.
Yeah, we read about that a lot in grad school.
About pneuma?
Yeah.
What? Why?
Just as an idea, there's a lot of people in music who are really into that idea.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Because what music affects the pneuma?
Yeah, something about the sensual quality of that, like pneuma as an extra sense or something like that. I don't know. I don't remember.
That's very interesting, though.
The humoral theory, though, was interesting to me because I read it and it immediately made me think of what we do today with hormone treatments.
In what sense?
For like depression and things like that. So the quote that I've highlighted in here, it's talking about, this is right at the beginning of the Schools of Medicine section, where it's saying that there wasn't really a unified school of medicine at the time, but then it says, perhaps the closest to a general agreement that there ever had been was a humoral theory, which postulated that the body's health depended upon a natural balance in the humors or fluids of bloods, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile.
Right.
And so the idea of the balance of these kind of bodily substances being what is sort of controlling your health sounds very similar to a lot of discussion today surrounding the way to treat different mental ailments.
Oh,
because
yeah.
a lot of it is about
yes.
balance of hormones, which I always find to be a kind of an odd idea.
Well, I would
because
say
I never hear anybody talking about what proportion of this hormone versus this hormone you actually need.
Well, yeah, we don't have because we don't have it because it's hard to measure it directly. But I was going to say we do this all the time in medicine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you basically have ions that are supposed to be within a certain level. I mean, I'm sure you've been to the doctor and you have ranges for everything. Uh-huh. So it's all balanced in that sense. And you actually can do a lot of like what nephrologists will do, people studying the kidney when they're trying to understand, the balance of the blood essentially is there's all of these ratiometric things that you do of like the proportion of sodium to potassium to chloride. There's a formula for this. So we actually do in other settings, I would say, take it to a much more quantifiable method than the hormonal system. But I agree, it's all can be abstracted looking at like this idea of balance. Right. It's just we've become much more reductionists, obviously. It's like we've broken blood into all of these other things. Right. I mean, all these things are in blood, but now we know blood is not just one thing, it's many things. Right. And phlegm is not just one thing, it's many things. Right.
But the principle actually seems to hold in a modern sense pretty well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like I said, I would say the big thing with medicine now versus then is just the detail. Right. That's, I think, a big thing that distinguishes it, is that you just couldn't be this detail-oriented. And it's not to say reductionism doesn't have its downsides, obviously, but I think it does explain a lot, Sure. Because, you can be like, oh, well, what's wrong with this person? Well, their sodium's too high or it's too low, or their potassium's too high or too low. Or they don't have enough hematocrit, or they don't have enough red blood cells.
Now, I imagine in practice, it's not usually, I'm not saying never, but it's not usually quite so precise in how it's quantified. Like, I imagine most people aren't taking somebody's blood and trying to get like exact proportions of potassium to sodium to something like that in most cases. I feel like they're usually trying a medicine and seeing how that works, and then trying another medicine and seeing how that works.
No, I mean, you can get a blood test that tells you...
No, I'm not saying it never happens. I'm saying that in my experience, and maybe I'm wrong, and this is definitely true with mental health, because people aren't usually getting hormone samples from your brain or something. They usually give you a medicine to try it, and if it's not working, they give you something else to try and do something else.
Yeah, but
and then when something works, they go, "Aha! You must have been low on that."
Yeah, yes. Because again, because neurotransmitters aren't generally circulating in the blood. Maybe they are to a small degree,
right?
But many of them are confined to the synapses, but you can certainly, and even hormones are, because hormones, are hydrophobic, so a lot of them are are sort of sequestered within the cells themselves. So of course you have some circulating, but they'll often be packaged in a certain way too. So like even just measuring cortisol is kind of difficult. You have to, mostly because it's so fluctuating though.
Right. But sodium is easier, I take it.
Sodium's easy especially because our body keeps it in a very confined range too. That's another sort of thing that distinguishes it from some of the hormones. And calcium especially. Calcium is actually my favorite ion, and it's kept within a very. It is. It's an amazing ion. Nice. I think of it as like the clock of the cell of the body.
Yeah.
Rather.
You've told me about that.
Yeah, and it's kept in a really narrow range. And if you go out of that range, you start to have issues of all sorts of problems. But sodium's the same way. It's kept within a relatively narrow range, and potassium too. And it's easy. You just get some blood, and then you do a test, and you extrapolate. And
then you can get like the proportions.
Yes. Yeah. But so I mean, this idea of balance is definitely not one that we've completely abandoned in modern medicine. And even this idea of like, we don't think about it as like treating something that's dry with something wet, but it is true. It's like, drinking water. Like if you have ever taken like Adderall or an amphetamine, it dries you out, right? And so what do? You drink water, and it sort of helps.
I feel like you don't usually do the opposite though. It's not usually like this person's way too wet, give them some amphetamines.
No. Well, no. Yeah, I'm trying to think what the alternative would be. Although you do give them, like often, if you have a runny nose, you're going to take
right.
Amphetamine, no. Well, no, I was going to say an anticholinergic, which does dry you out.
I see. But like, isn't ephedrine an amphetamine?
Ephedrine's it's an alpha and beta agonist.
Nice.
So I would say it's more similar to like adrenaline. But like but the amphetamines are also going to do things with dopamine. I mean, you're essentially right, and it dries you out, and you're right, yes. So you use that for nasal decongestions, antihistamines too. It'll be packaged with something like that.
Although they don't let you anymore. But
what do you mean?
You can't buy ephedrine.
Oh yeah. Oh,
you can't even buy pseudoephedrine anymore. I don't think.
Really. I didn't know that. Oh, because people were making meth with them?
I think so.
Yeah.
Maybe you can still buy pseudoephedrine over the counter, like if you go to the pharmacy counter. But I don't think you can buy ephedrine at all.
Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, getting back to it, it's like, so that's another example of how you can kind of think about it as drying you out. And we, use it to treat a runny nose.
Right. I guess that you are too wet in that case.
Yeah. So some of these principles are not completely lost, and
I feel like the atom, which was the group that were into atomization.
Oh, the school. Oh, the ones we can't say. The A group.
Yeah. I feel like that aspect is still going. It's basically reductionist, right?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
They just had different. It's the same thing as the balance idea. It's that we're more detailed than they were. But
Right. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so I think a big reason I at least wanted to read the intro to this was because, as I said, it was getting at a little bit of what you were asking, like way back in the second episode or something, about like how did a physician look differently than today? And he spends a little bit of time talking about what a physician was back then when he's, I mean, so it's interesting because John M. Riddle, he's obviously an accredited historian, it seems, because you can see how detailed he is to sort of show, like, why do we think he was a physician? Because, again, there's not basically anything known about Dioscorides aside from what other people have written about him and what he's sort of the little things that he wrote in his treatise. So we have to use a lot of inferences to try to understand, like, so we don't even know for sure he was a doctor, but as the author goes through, it's pretty certain that he was a doctor because of, as opposed to being what the equivalent of a pharmacist then was. And you had even different types of sort of pharmacists. You had, root cutters versus some other
root cutters
thing.
versus root druggists.
Right. So,
but they're both root.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, I guess these were the people that would actually go out and get the stuff, and then maybe pharmacists were the ones that would mix up the concoctions. But I think doctors did that themselves too, as, again, evidenced by Dioscorides. But I think sort of the biggest definition that the author offers for what a physician back then is that you weren't really a physician if you didn't have patience. So as soon as you have patience, you're basically a physician. And I thought that was really interesting because, and this is, I found it really intriguing to read how it's like the physicians back then were much more itinerant too. And there weren't any accreditations aside, the Hippocrates school was kind of an accreditation back in the day, but this was even hundreds of years after that. And so you had just word of mouth to go by and maybe like your teacher's name to go by. And also just the definitive way that you would get a bunch of patients is that you would go travel to a community that needed a doctor, and then they would basically have you treat the people in front of the whole town and judge you.
Did it work? Yeah.
Yeah, did it work? And if it did, then you can stay and treat people. And if not, then you got to get out.
I like how there was that one little bit as a side note about if the patients died and you hadn't predicted it, it would be a problem. But then, to me, that opens up this entire possibility of you predicting it and then giving them something surreptitiously that's going to kill them.
Yeah. There are no trade-offs, no solutions, only trade-offs.
There are no trade-offs, only solutions.
Trade-offs, only solutions. I like to take it the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's it.
I mean,
creates
I'm just
an interesting
making something
incentive.
up.
But also, obviously, I mean, sure. I guess that is one issue.
I mean, I feel like it's a little bit in the spirit of this chapter. I got the sense that a lot of this chapter is just, I would read, because of what this person writes and this person writes, he must have been this. And I go, sure, maybe.
Right. But you can probably at least appreciate that he's walking you through the reason. That's what I really liked about it, is he goes through why he wasn't likely a druggist. I mean, and some of the reasons, what were some of the reasons? Let's see. Like he didn't talk about, or like why he wasn't a drug dealer, basically. He didn't really talk about like the price of things at all. It was all just about the medicine itself. And, it talks about how he was likely not a physician in the Roman legions.
Right.
And
because he didn't talk about the types of things that you would have been treating, wounds, things like that.
He didn't talk about wounds exactly, and why he was probably not well, yeah, and why he was probably more mercantilistic because he was, in page 3, it's the places that Dioscorides mentions in the context of personal observations are mercantile sites,
Right.
and very few are military posts where legionnaires were
But this
assigned.
is where it strikes me that, so if they think he's mercantilistic, why isn't he selling? To me, that's already at least suggesting selling something.
I think it was more of the idea that, he was an itinerant physician, as we already discussed. And of course, you're selling to some degree your medicine. Mm-hmm. So, and you're going to probably go to the places where people are that might want medicine, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to go to the population centers potentially. I thought that was fun though.
Right.
Yeah. And it's interesting how, like, the standing of physicians in the Roman legions was, the standing of physicians in the Roman legions may have been little higher than that of legionnaires who developed a skill in treating injuries. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just like, actually, the doctors in the army were not as high up,
they didn't
essentially.
care that much
yeah.
about them. Yeah.
Right. Whereas it seemed like Dioscorides was part of, actually, despite the fact that he was trying not to get into all the priestly sort of philosophical discussions, he was one of the higher castes of physicians. Mm-hmm. Yeah. One was a physician if one practiced medicine, and one could practice medicine if they, in rare cases, if they had patients. Mm-hmm. It was the direct quote was, and one could practice medicine if he, and in rare cases, she had patients.
And you just...
I was trying to be, but actually it's interesting because I think I was reading somewhere that actually women were thought to be the major doctors in, like, Gaul and, Northern Europe, basically, before Rome entered the picture.
Right.
Which I could see. I mean, they are much more attentive than us.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
I feel like it depends on how glorious and how famous doctors are.
What do you mean?
Because I feel like guys, we really like being famous for our wonderful intellect.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. Well, and I guess it's just this idea that, I think you're right. I think probably as the social status of physicians rose, you got more men going into it.
Right.
Because we're constantly looking for ways to, stand
Climb
out
the
from
social
others.
ladder, yeah.
Right, we got to stand out.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I agree though. And I said this before we started recording, but it's like I don't really know how much else of this book is going to be interesting to read. It's very encyclopedic. The main reason I wanted to read just this first part, as I've already said, was it gives just a snapshot of a physician at the time, 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And
so as kind of a fun little bit in it, what do you think of the whole cow's milk cheese paragraph?
Oh.
What are your personal thoughts on the paragraph? And what all does it mean also?
Wait, which part is? Oh, that part. Yeah.
So Pliny the Elder is talking about cow's milk and cheese, and Dioscorides has a similar paragraph in his writing.
Yeah, well, I actually found because this was basically the part talking about how Pliny the Elder was very good about writing his sources, but Dioscorides wasn't, and so this is a criticism of Dioscorides was that, he was really just compiling a bunch of other people's works, which even
so
if
they're drawing off the same sources, previous or something. That's at least being proposed. But what do you think about the actual paragraph? What about what he's writing? The suggestions. So cow's milk, cheese, the same properties as cheese from a mare's milk, which is beneficial to the stomach, are those not salted. So non-salted cheeses are beneficial to the stomach. This is just like, it's funny because it's what it feels to me very, what now we would consider sort of like strange, almost like witchy, earthy, crunchy kind of things.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's funny that you honed in on that, because I actually honed in on the next page, or the 2 pages later, where they're talking about hemlock.
Right. Sure.
And if you rub hemlock on, well, I don't even know if I should say.
Wait, what? Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, it's very spicy idea of what you could do with hemlock. But yeah, no, I honestly didn't really, I think I skimmed over this. So I don't know. What are you trying to get at with
I'm not
the
trying to
milk
get
stuff?
at anything. I was just trying to ask about a silly paragraph.
Oh, yeah. No, I thought the hemlock was more interesting.
Nice.
Anaxylus, this is Pliny the Elder speaking, is responsible for the statement that if the breasts are rubbed with hemlock from adult maidenhood onwards, they will always remain firm.
Nice.
What is certain is that an application of hemlock to the breasts of women in childbed dries up their milk, and to rub it on the testicles at the time of puberty acts as an anti-aphrodisiac.
Who is testing this? Why did they think about that?
You had a lot of time back
I wonder.
then. Well, it's funny because where else did we read about hemlock, right? Who drank the hemlock?
Right.
Yeah. Socrates.
Right.
That's who.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I mean, then they were also talking about the oak, the holm oak, which grows in Narbonensis, a province of Gaul, has such power that those who rest in its shade or sleep under it are harmed often, even to death.
Right.
One informed of this situation should be mindful of it. So, I mean, that's kind of interesting. I don't know why. Yeah. But yeah, no, I don't know. So that's essentially what like the other chapters are. Is they're just going through all this stuff.
Sure.
Just and don't get me wrong, it is kind of interesting because one of the things I liked reading about this was, and this is actually the reason I wanted to read it, because I'm just constantly, I am curious of what we've lost so much information about what, I mean, people used to live a decent to a decent age, so it was obviously possible to live, I mean, more rarely to your 80s, but at least to your 60s with this sort of medicine. And, they had types of anti-tumorals, a lot of the same sort of things that we use today, like vincristine and stuff, drugs like that are used for chemo today are actually isolated from plants. And so they would, use a lot of these concoctions, obviously in a much more, primitive sense, or not primitive, but it's like it's not as they weren't getting the isolate, obviously, as probably directly as we are.
Whatever the opposite of diluted is.
Yeah. Well,
dilute. Hang on.
It was diluted in that. It was more diluted back then.
Right. Distilled. I mean, the opposite.
Distilled. Yeah. We've distilled it down more. You had the opposite. It's distilled.
Is it? Is diluted the opposite of distilled?
I think it's an opposite.
Sure.
Perhaps there's more than one.
Yeah. Well, so do you want to keep reading on this one? What's funny is I just started glancing at the next chapter, and it says one plant, one chapter or something, and it's and then it. What's interesting about this book is it feels like it's less about what Dioscorides said and more about the research practices that he had and then the research practices of researching him.
There's a lot of the research practices of researching him. Yeah. And that's like one reason, like the last chapter, Done and Undone, it's just all about all the different editions and just like details that, you know, who really cares in some sense. I mean, it's interesting, but, you know, it's not anything that we need to go into. But
it's something that I never really get that into, and I don't fully see how people get so excited about it. Like people who are really into research methods would probably like a book like this.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, because it talks about, again, like the alphabetical order stuff. You know, a lot of the editions that came after changed the alphabetical order, and he goes into all this whole thing about, you know, like, why did they do this and stuff like that. And I'm just like, I don't really care.
Right. And then I guess he did a one plant per chapter kind of a thing.
So, yeah, I think so. And I was going to say, if we stay with this, the animal, minerals, spirits chapter would probably be the better one to do.
Okay.
But yeah, I was thinking that we could either jump back to the doctor's book and do another chapter from, you know, there. Because there's, you know, there's a bunch that we didn't read.
Yeah.
Or we could do that paper on consciousness that I was wanting to do.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But I mean, it'll be kind of an interesting experiment to see. Because actually what I was kind of thinking going forward, to try to be a little bit more smart with my own time, is I'll probably be choosing more medical science related things generally.
Yeah.
Especially because it's in more of my wheelhouse anyway.
Sounds good.
Or it is in my wheelhouse.
And then I'll have us learn like 30 covers.
That sounds like a good idea. But yeah, I wonder though how much jargon. I mean, it'll be curious. We'll see how you feel about it. But I can at least talk about it, and maybe you'll get something out of it. It's not too long. It's kind of long, but it's like, you know, it's a research paper.
Right.
Basically, this guy had this theory on the location of consciousness that I thought was really intriguing. And it was published, you know, it's just like a journal article that was published in like 2010. And I can resend it to you.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm down. I would rather do that, I think, than go back to the... I'm not opposed to going back to doctors, but the second thing sounds more fun.
Yeah. No, we can do that. And yeah, we'll see. And if this works, then we can do more things like that. Because, I mean, there's tons of review articles out in the world, too.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can see how... I think he's a PhD
I feel like it'd be a good time to change things up a little bit. The other thought that I had that I mentioned at one point is going into some fiction.
Right.
Something like Ayn Rand might be fun. I've been seeing a lot of Ayn Rand quotes, and so... Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, I don't really want to read Ayn Rand, but yeah, we can do something her. I mean, I did, and it was fine. I did it, you know, and I don't really feel the need to go back and read her again. Unless, I guess, if you want.
Well, I was actually gonna suggest her nonfiction.
Well, I was gonna say, if you want to do that, I haven't ever read that. So yeah, her objectivist sort of papers or whatever, right?
I don't remember what it's called. Yeah, it basically just lays out her philosophy.
Right. That would be fine. Yeah, I didn't really want to go back and like read experts from the fountainhead. Like, let's read John Galt's speech.
Yeah. Right.
Which I skimmed over the first time I read it, you know, or the only time I read it.
Nice.
Like, I'm not reading this. This is the same thing about freedom and autonomy.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, that works. So we'll do that. I'll resend that to you.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, no, I agree. Probably switching it up is good. So you've been pretty busy learning covers.
Yeah, well, it's the Houston gig. I think I still have like 160 to go.
Oh my God.
It's like
how many?
It's like over 250 songs on this list.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Does it pay just for one gig? You have to know all these.
It's not that we're going to play all of them. It's that they might call any of them.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's how these wedding. So it's these really sharp corporate wedding bands for people. You know, the weddings probably cost $5 million, kind of a thing.
Wow. Right.
Maybe not that much, but a lot. You know.
No, but it makes sense. You have to have a large repertoire? Because I imagine it's going to be people will be asking for things, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just like, so you just have a really, really deep set list, and you can go anywhere depending on the crowd.
God. So when is the gig again?
The 27th.
Oh, so you still have some time. That's good.
Yeah.
How do you?
Yeah, it's just like every night I'm just like banging through, and some of the songs they have charts written for, and that's way easier. And then sometimes they don't, or sometimes their charts are wrong, and then so I make my own. It's just like
that sounds stressful.
Takes a long time.
I guess, yeah, because I was going to ask. I mean, it's not like you're going to remember all of these, but I guess you'll just make notes.
Charts written for everything.
Yeah.
No, I'm definitely not going to remember that. But some things, some things are good to memorize. Like "Sweet Child of Mine," I just got to have that whole thing. Just like
The
solo's hard.
Yeah. Hey, Axe was no slouch.
Yeah, "You Shook Me All Night Long." That's another one that's kind of tricky.
Interesting.
And that intro to "Don't Stop Believin'."
Yeah.
It's just that one part.
Yeah. I learned that, actually. Yeah, we did that in high school.
Oh, did you with the sextuplets? I can't do it.
Yeah. How did I do that? I don't remember how I did it, but I think I did it.
I fake it, but I can't do it right.
I'm sure you could do it. If I could do it in high school, you could do it.
It's really weird because it becomes triplets, but you're doing two per string, so they like get off from
Yeah, I remember. I probably wasn't doing it exactly, too. I probably fudged
I used to think I could do it. When I was like 13 or 14, I was like, oh, this is easy. And I didn't even know I wasn't doing it right.
Right. That's probably what I was doing, honestly. Ignorance is bliss. Dang.
Yeah, all those rock guitar players from the 70s and 80s are way better than I used to think that they were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, well, those hair metal bands, I mean... Come on.
Boo!
Yeah. I mean, and Zeppelin's not like completely difficult, but it's,
Yeah.
It's
tricky.
Exactly. And to play it correctly every time, and stuff. Yeah. So, I mean, I happen to remember, you are sort of the king of fudging it.
Well, I'm not fudging it on this one.
I was going to say, no, it makes sense. And I shouldn't say that. I mean, this was, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
When you had...
I feel like I over-prepare now. I have this problem where I sort of obsessively prepare, and it ends up working in my favor. Like, I rarely fail at a gig now, but... I probably spend more time than I need to on them.
Yeah. No, I mean, we didn't really talk about the, the show that I did over the holidays. Mm-hmm. But I mean, this was like 9 songs. And I was trying to learn them like 2 days beforehand. Mm-hmm. But I forgot how stressful it is I messed up a lot. I messed up so bad. Not so bad, but kind of bad on silly things like, what is it? What the hell is the song called? Little Help from My Friends, Dun, dun, dun. That part, I just screwed that part up. And it's like, and the beginning, it's just like I did the wrong note. But it's like, that's the guitar. You just have to be, there's just, there's the fills. You need to get the fills right when it's just all you. Yeah. I don't miss those days. Yeah.
But we have a show coming up together for anybody listening.
Oh, yeah, we do.
Yeah, in Dripping Springs, Texas.
Yeah.
They make good vodka there.
Oh, yeah?
Dripping Springs vodka. I like it.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I haven't ever had that. Yeah. What is that? It's next Friday, right?
Next Friday. Yep. That is 7:30 to 10:30. Playing at Dog and Bone Pub. It's a really nice place. They have an indoor. They have an outdoor. Depending on what the weather's like, we'll probably be outdoors. But if it's really cold or it's rainy, we'll be inside. And they're cool because they're a new place. They just opened like 8-9 months ago or something like that. And I've played there 3 times now, 2 or 3 times. And the owner's cool.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a fun spot.
You said you do like a mix of covers and originals?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And are you playing acoustic or electric when you do this?
I'll play acoustic and banjo probably.
Okay.
You want to bring an electric rock out, do some tapping?
Yes, of course. You know me. Yeah, I'm just the electric man.
Yeah.
I should put this part in the front of the podcast, get our plugs out.
We're doing but that's some editing. We can do it next week, too. Our plugs.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, we've got next week to plug.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Yeah. I'm trying to maybe do like half covers, half originals. All my originals are depressing. That's why.
That's fine. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, but I just think
originals don't usually get tips is the problem.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And so, I mean, like so it's people just going to eat food basically?
They don't have food there. It's just drinks. It's just beer. It's
just a venue.
Beer and wine. Yeah. They don't even have liquor. They don't have a liquor license yet even.
Wow. Don't say that.
Don't say that?
Well, I don't know. Isn't that illegal?
No, they don't sell liquor. No. I'm saying they don't sell liquor because they don't have a liquor license.
Oh, so it's a BYOB thing.
No. They sell beer and wine.
Oh, they don't sell liquor. Sorry, I'm being stupid. Yes, you said.
Honestly, they are allowed. Yeah. They sell what they're allowed to sell.
Sorry, man. I was just being. I always forget that I forget it because it seems stupid to me that we like say, okay, liquor and beer and wine are going to be in two categories. It's like, all right.
And then in Texas, you can't buy liquor from a grocery store.
Yeah, on Sundays, right?
You can't buy liquor from a grocery store here at all.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
You have to go to a liquor store. And yes, you can't buy it on Sundays at all.
Yeah. All these interesting rules.
Right. But yeah, come on out to Dripping Springs, Hill Country. It's pretty out there.
Yeah. Nice. It's God's country.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. Well.
And then where everybody listen up for the secret after party.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
In the hills.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, cool. Yeah, so I guess we sort of said it all off with Dioscorides, right?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, cool. Well, I don't remember what the thing next week is called.
We're doing consciousness.
We're doing consciousness next week. Oh yeah, so it's basically this guy had this theory that this specific part in the thalamus is responsible for consciousness, or at least it could be looked at as the main pipeline that all of your senses have to go through and all your motor information has to go through to get in and out of the brain. So, all the sensations have to go up and all the motor stuff has to come down. And it's a very, there's a lot of inhibitory neurons. So it's doing a lot of inhibition of things. So you can think of it as like you've got this water hose of information. And so your body, the way that it's deciding what should actually get to the brain is by inhibiting certain parts, which is why, when you think about what consciousness is, it is this control mechanism to decide what senses are you going to be perceiving and putting your attention on, which is kind of feels like the tip of consciousness, attention. And so he details just a bunch of reasons why this part of the thalamus isn't. But we'll see how you feel about it because it's very jargon heavy. I mean, like I don't know if you know what the thalamus is, but you'll
not really
be reading
but
about
I'll look it up.
Yeah.
And I'll probably still be confused because I'm good.
Yeah, because it's specifically like the reticular part.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I know,
like a reticulated python.
Exactly.
I do know about a reticulated python.
Well, it's one of the same, Zantushka. Nice. Cool. And yeah, Reddit is, who cares,
Who cares? I mean, I care. I really just haven't had a chance.
No. And also, I really do think it's bad for the psyche to be like on Reddit. Well, I don't know. You seem to be unperturbed by it, but it
doesn't bother me.
Yeah, it's impressive. You're made for the internet, Antushka.
Which is silly because I kind of want the internet to go away. I have a secret desire that the internet stops.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have that desire.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I talk to a lot of people who want it to just like unplug. You might get that wish. Everybody's talking about how crazy 2024 is going to be.
Yeah, I know.
Literally
it's
everybody.
gonna go crazy.
I know. Literally everybody's saying this could be a wild year.
Yeah.
It's like, all
Isn't
right.
every year a wild year? Because
Yeah,
everyone's
but
like, "Ooh, 2023 was rough."
Right. I think it's just because of the election.
Right.
We are seeing a lot of crazy things happening.
It's true, but we also are very connected to everything.
That's true.
I don't see that many crazy things outside my door.
Not yet.
Yeah, that's true.
Not
just
yet,
wait
Antushka.
till we get into 2024.
Exactly.
In a couple weeks, I'll just be like, "Whoa, this is a crazy year."
Yeah. Is that a reticulated rattlesnake?
Yeah, right.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah. All right.
All right. See you.